Hi CCSS 7 students. Today I'm going to be talking about lesson 4, which is on adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numbers. So what we are going to start by looking at is going to be adding mixed numbers. So many of you remember how to add fractions from elementary school. If you forgot, if you learn how to add mixed numbers, you will also be able to add fractions. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to break this down into several steps. Step 1 is going to be to find a common denominator. We can do this by looking for the least common multiple. So if we look at the example, 15 3/4 plus 8 1/6. Okay, if we look here at the denominators of 4 and 6, they have a least common multiple of 12, which means that 12 is going to be our common denominator. So our next step is going to be to convert the denominators to the least common multiple. To do that, we're going to take each of the fractions, so 3/4 and 1/6, and we're going to convert it to 12ths. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 3/4. Now we know that 4 times 3 equals 12. So whatever we do to the bottom, we're going to also do to the top. So we're going to take 3 times 3, which equals 9. So we know that 3/4 is equal to 9/12. Now we're going to do the same thing with 1/6. We know that 6 times 2 equals 12. Whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. So we're going to take 1 times 2, which equals 2. Now we have two new fractions and they both have a common denominator. What we're going to do now is we're going to add those fractions together. So when you're adding fractions with a common denominator, the denominator stays the same all throughout the problem. You only add the numerators. So we're going to take 9 plus 2, which equals 11. We'll move on to step 4. Step 4 is going to be to add the whole numbers together. So we're going to go back to our original problem and we're going to add these whole numbers together. 15 plus 8 equals 23. And for step 5, we're going to put our answer together. We're going to take our whole number of 23 and our fraction of 11/12. Now, we're not done until we ask ourselves, can we simplify? In this case, we cannot simplify 11/12, so our answer is complete. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at an example. So I've given you the example 36 4/15, so 36 4/15, plus 17 7/9. What I'd like you to do is try this one on your own. Feel free to start the video at any time to see me go through it. However, if you try this completely on your own and you want to check your answer, feel free to fast forward the video ahead to check that answer. Now, if you're going to try it on your own, I want you to pause the video now and click play as soon as you're ready to check your answer. All right, we're going to go ahead and check that answer. So if we remember, step 1 was to find a common denominator using the least common multiple. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Between 15 and 9, our least common multiple is going to be 45. So what we want to do is take both of our fractions and convert the denominators to 45. So if we start with 14/15, we know that 15 times 3 equals 45. Whatever we do to the bottom, we're going to do to the top. 14 times 3 is 42. Same thing with 7/9. We're going to take 7/9 times 5/5 to get 35/45. Now, we will move on to step 3. Step 3 is going to be to add those two fractions together. So we're going to take 42/45 plus 35/45. We know that we're going to keep the denominator the same because we have that common denominator, and we're going to add the numerators together. Well, when you add the numerators together, you should get an answer of 77/45. Now, we know that that's an improper fraction, but we don't have to simplify it yet. We'll move on to step 4, and step 4 is going to be to add the whole numbers. So we're going to go back to that original problem, and we're going to add 36 and 17. 36 plus 17 is 53. So now we have an answer of 53 and 77 over 45. Now, don't forget that step 5 is to simplify. So we see here that we have an improper fraction. Because we have an improper fraction, we can remove a whole, okay, or 45 pieces from this fraction, which leaves us with 32 over 45. Now, once we remove that whole, we're going to bring it over to our whole number, and we're going to increase our whole number by 1 whole. So instead of 53, we're going to have 54 and 32 over 45. This cannot be simplified any further, so we know that we are done. All right, next, we are going to go over subtracting mixed numbers without regrouping. So subtracting is very similar to adding. It's a little bit different, but you can do it just fine. Step 1, again, is going to be to find a common denominator using the least common multiple. In order to do that, we're going to look at this example. 27 and 7/8 minus 4 and 1/5. Now, if we look at our denominator of 8 and 5, they have a least common multiple of 40, which means that we're going to convert the denominators to the least common multiple of 40. We're going to take 7/8. We know that in order to get our denominator to 40, we have to take 8 times 5. Whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. 7 times 5 is 35. So now, instead of 7/8, we have an equivalent fraction of 35 over 40. Next, we have 1/5 times 8 over 8. When we multiply straight across, we get 5 times 8 is 40, and 1 times 8 is 8. So instead of 1/5, we have an equivalent fraction of 8 over 40. Next, what we're going to do is subtract the two fractions. So similarly to adding, when we subtract two fractions, we leave the denominators the same because we have that common denominator. And we just subtract the numerators. So 35 minus 8 is 27. So our new fraction is 27 over 40. Step 4 is going to be to subtract the whole numbers. So we're going to take 27 minus 4, which is 23. Now we are going to simplify. So we've got our whole number of 23. And then we've got our fraction of 27 over 40. This cannot be simplified any further, so we know that we are done. One thing that I'm going to show you, instead of writing your subtraction of fractions horizontally, like I showed you up here, I'm going to encourage you to actually write the problem vertically over here. This is going to, with subtraction problems, and actually you can do this with addition as well, this is actually going to save you a lot of trouble when you have a subtraction problem with regrouping, which we will go over in just a moment. What I'm going to have you do now is take a look at this example 1. We have 30 and 3/4 minus 4 and 1/6. I want you to go ahead and try this one on your own. Feel free to pause the video now and restart the video as soon as you're ready to check your answer. Go ahead and pause the video now. All right, let's go ahead and check our answer. Our first step is going to be to find that common denominator, which should be our least common multiple. Between 4 and 16, the least common multiple is 16. So we will take 3/4 and we'll multiply it by 4 over 4 to get 12/16. Now with our second fraction is 1 over 16, which already has a denominator that matches our least common multiple. So we don't need to change this fraction at all. Step 3. Oh, I'm gonna start skipping. Okay. Step 3 and 4 is going to be to line up these fractions and subtract them together. So we've got 30 and 12/16 minus 4 and 1/16. Well, 12 minus 1 is 11. We keep the denominators the same, so we have 11 over 16. And 30 minus 4 is 26. So our final answer in step 5 is going to be 26 and 11/16 because this cannot be simplified. All right, the next example that we're going to look at gets a little bit trickier. The next example we're going to look at is subtracting mixed number with regrouping. Remember, this regrouping is why I'm showing you to line your fractions up vertically. So, you guessed it, your first step is going to be to find the common denominator, which should be the least common multiple. If we look at this example, 11 and 2/5 minus 7 and 2/3. Between 5 and 3, we have a least common multiple of 15. So we're going to convert the denominators to 15. 2/5 multiplied by 3/3 would give us 6/15 as our equivalent fraction. Now we have 2/3 multiplied by 5/5, which gives us 10/15. Again, this is an equivalent fraction to 2/3. Step 3 is going to be to line the problem up vertically. You're going to see in a moment that you cannot subtract 10 from 6, so you must borrow a whole number. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. If I line my fractions up vertically, I end up with 11 with 6/15, and I'm subtracting 7 and 10/15. Well, if I look here, if I've got 6 pieces, I can't subtract 10 pieces from 6 pieces. So I know that I have to regroup these fractions so that I can make that subtraction problem work. In order to do that, we're going to look at this first mixed number of 11 and 6/15. Now, we can regroup this. We can take one whole away from the whole number. So we've got 10 plus 1 plus 6/15. Now, with that one whole, if I was to convert that into fraction form, that fraction would be 15/15. So what I can do is actually take 10 plus 15/15 plus 6/15. Okay? If I combine my two fractions together and add them, I would end up with 10 and 21/15. Now, yes, I know that this is an improper fraction, but for this type of subtraction problem with regrouping, that is a-okay. So what we're going to do now is take a look at this vertical subtraction problem. So if I've got 10 and 21/15 minus 7 and 10/15, since I did that regrouping with my first mixed number, I can take 21 minus 10, which equals 11. Now, anytime I'm subtracting fractions with a common denominator, my denominator stays the same, and I can take 10 minus 7, which equals 3. So now my final fraction in step 5 is going to be 3 and 11/15. I must remember to ask myself, can this be simplified? If I take a look at it, it cannot be simplified. So now I know that I am done. All right, next we're going to look at an example. Again, I want you to try this one on your own. Okay, feel free to pause the video and restart it as soon as you're ready to check your answer. Go ahead and pause the video now. Alrighty, let's go ahead and check that answer. So what we have is 29 and 1/5 minus 6 and 1/2. Between our denominators 5 and 2, we have a least common multiple of 10. So that's step 1. Step 2 is going to be to find that common denominator. Well, 1/5 is the equivalent to 2/10. 1/2 is the equivalent to 5/10. Now, what we'll do next is we'll look at step number 3. what I'm going to do is line these fractions up vertically. So I've got 29 and 2/10 minus 6 and 5/10. Now, if I've got two pieces, I can't take away 5. So what I know is I need to regroup this upper fraction or this upper mixed number so that I can complete the subtraction problem. So I'm going to move over to step 3 and step 4. If I take 1 away from my whole, I now have 28 wholes, and instead of 2/10, I have 12/10 because I'm adding that whole to my fraction. Now what I can do is take 12 minus 5, which is 7, and we know that the 10s are going to stay because it's a common denominator. And then I can take 28 minus 6 and get 22, which means that my final answer is 22 and 7/10. Alrighty, we are going to go ahead and try one more example. This last example is 18 and 3/10 minus 4 and 11/15. Again, you know the deal. Go ahead and pause the video, give this one a try on your own, and feel free to restart the video as soon as you are ready to check that answer. So, with this next one, in example 4, our first step is going to be to find a least common multiple. Between 10 and 15, my least common multiple is 30. Step 2 is going to be to find those equivalent fractions. So 3/10 is the equivalent to 9/30. 11/15 is the equivalent to 22/30. My next step is going to be to line them up. Now I have 18 and 9/30 minus 4 and 22/30. Again, I can't take 9 and subtract 22 from it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to regroup my fractions. Instead of 18 and 9/30, I'm going to have 17 and 39/30. So I'm again taking one whole away from my whole number, and I'm adding that whole to my fraction. Now I'm going to subtract 4 and 22/30. So 39 minus 22 is 17. My denominator stays at 30. Now I'm going to subtract the whole numbers. 17 minus 4 is 13. Now I have to ask myself, can this be simplified? In this example, it cannot be simplified. So my step 5, my final answer is 13 and 17/30. All right, boys and girls, I know that I just went through this adding and subtracting fractions pretty quickly. So if you have questions, feel free to see me during class or after class. I would love to help you out with them. Now, you're going to notice on your homework that your problems are going to get a little bit harder. So what you need to remember is your adding and subtracting integers rules. You know, I told you last unit that these were not going away, and I was really right. These are not going away. So what you have to remember is when you are adding two numbers that have the same sign, you're going to find the sum of their absolute values. If the numbers are negative, then the answer is negative. If the numbers are positive, then the answer is positive. Now, when you're adding two numbers that have opposite or different signs, you're going to find the difference between those two numbers. If the bigger number is positive, then the result is positive. If the bigger number is negative, then the result or answer is negative. Again, when we are subtracting, you will want to add its opposite, or keep it in the minuend, change the subtraction sign to an addition sign, and add the opposite of the subtrahend. So if we look here, here's a little cheat sheet for subtraction. If we've got a positive minus a positive, we change it to a positive plus a negative. If we've got a positive minus a negative, it changes to a positive plus a positive. If we've got a negative minus a positive, it changes to negative plus a negative. If we've got a negative minus a negative, it changes to negative plus a positive. So make sure that you are keeping these rules out as you're going through and doing your practice problems. Okay? I would also suggest that every time you finish a problem on your homework that you're practicing, that you go to the answer key and you check your answer right away so that you are checking your work. Okay, this can be a really tough concept, this adding and subtracting rational numbers with negatives and positives. So please, please, please make sure that you are reaching out for help if you feel that you need it. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.